Well, hello. Hello, and welcome to another tarot deck video from Neopets. So, this is going to be a little confusing, so hold on, because Neopets actually has two tarot decks. So, what's the difference? I'm going to go over that, but first, we're going to look a little bit more into this one. So, this one, as of recording the video, just came out. It's currently got a price point in the US of $22.99, which, bringing back our other one, it doesn't say on the back, but it's about $60 on Geekify. So, there's very much a big price difference between these. And I personally feel like the marketing itself is a little confusing on the difference between the two and what this actually is. So we're going to give this a good looking through completely. We're going to look at all the cards and everything. And then we're also at the end going to compare the two decks so that we can see what's different. So starting off, obviously the box art itself is a little bit different than the other one. It's really nice. It's got the actual box where you can hold it on the side and lift the top itself up. So let's look at the box itself just a little bit since I've got it open right here. Nothing too crazy with it. It just says Neopets, the official tarot card deck, on every single side. You can see though that it does say that this is the Faerie edition. So there is a little bit of a difference between those two right there. And then on the back of the box itself, we can see that it gives us a little excerpt about the deck and everything, what it includes, the price, and all of that. So from here, it does come with a book. This book is paperback, but it is in full color. So we're going to look through this book just a little bit so we can see everything in it. I say a little bit, but we'll probably flip through a good amount of it. This picture here is actually going to be the back of what the cards look like for this deck. So that's nice. This book also gives us a little bit of information about tarot itself. So if you don't know what tarot is, pretty much they're cards that you can use for divination purposes, or if you're just kind of curious about what's today going to be like, you can pull a card, get a little fortune for yourself, whatever works best for you. I do like that this book does give all of the information on like different spreads, so it's not just a one card spread. You can get up to the Celtic Cross, which is nice because it explains all the parts of it. It does start off in the order that the cards come in when they're in the box. So it's going to start off with the Major Arcana, and it shows us a picture of it in full color, the name, it shows us the representation of it. It shows us, well, meaning, essentially. It shows us also what it means when it's reversed. So when you're reading tarot, you can either read just straight up what the card's meaning is, or some people read what's called reversals. So if I draw a card out and it's upside down, instead of being just like this picture, then it's going to have a little bit of a different meaning. So it's nice that they include this because some of the books don't include this. I mean, some tarot decks don't even come with a book. So this is already leagues above the others. It's super nice. But one thing I do really like about this is not only does it tell what the card means, it also gives us a little bit of Neopets lore here, talking about the card itself, what the picture means, where they pulled all this information from. So if you haven't seen the other tarot deck, which I do have a video where I go completely through it that I'll link below, they do actually hold true to all of the Neopets lore in it, which is super cool. So I really like that they did this. Now, the reason that I mention my other video, even though we're going to go deep into this, spoiler alert, this deck is pretty much the exact same thing. It's just a cheaper version of it. Again, we'll compare both of them so you can see that at the end, and I have timestamps below if you want to just skip to that. But these are pretty much the exact same tarot decks, just at two different price points. But the book itself, like I said, it's really nice. It's really nice that it comes with a book. It's crazy to me that it's in full color, honestly. You can see that it also has the Minor Arcana section as well. It explains a little bit about what the Minor Arcana is. Goes into showing that for every single card in the deck. And what I like about this book is they don't shy away from having to take up a little bit more space in this book, because they give you the full lore from Neopets, the full meaning of the card, the full reverse meaning, and a little bit of information extra if they feel it's necessary. So I really, really, really appreciate this book, and I think they did an awesome, awesome job of putting this book together. But for the most part, it's just a little book on tarot information. But if you don't know anything about tarot, honestly, I don't feel like you even need to buy a tarot book if you're getting this deck. This book, since it's pretty much the exact same as the other one, is just amazing. So love, love, love this book. So let's get into the meat and potatoes, the actual deck itself. Whenever I got it, it did come with a little band, 2 of them, one here around the cards. I went ahead and took it off because I'm going to be honest, I'm going to struggle and it's going to be embarrassing for me to take that off on camera. So let's go ahead and get it out. So these cards themselves, I feel like, are pretty big. I feel like average size hands. I'll measure these and put the measurement on screen for you so that you can actually see, because you don't know my hand size. But I feel like they're pretty big cards to deal with. So I personally am not a fan of that. The other cards are a good amount smaller than these, which is nice because I feel like these cards are the perfect size from the first set. We're going to go through and we're going to look at the art on every single card for this one. And whenever you get tarot cards, they're typically always in this order, where they're going through the major arcana first. So it's going to show every single one of those. And then it goes through the minor arcana, and it's going to go in an order from like cups to swords. I'll be honest, I don't remember the order right off the bat. I am going to go through these just a little bit quick because I did already go through all of these in the other video. And like I said, these cards are the exact same ones. I'll show all of the differences closer to the end of this video, but I'm a little upset with this deck for that. I think there are pros and cons with this deck. The biggest one being the price point. This deck retails for $22.99 USD. I got it on Amazon. It was on sale for $17 and some odd change. So it's an amazing price, not only for a Neopets merch item, but for a tarot deck in general. Tarot decks are normally pretty expensive, so this is a good price. The paper quality itself is pretty good. It does have a very not matte finish, so it's very shiny. So I feel like it doesn't look amazingly well if you're in a highlight situation where you're going to be doing readings for people or something like that with these cards. So it's not bad, but this is a very, very, very good price point for a tarot deck. And if you don't own the other Neopets tarot deck, this deck is so cool as a Neopets fan. It's awesome. It's got so much lore in it. The artwork is so fun, so vibrant. The printing is still really good on this one. It's beautiful to look at. They remained really, really true to the typical Rider-Waite images on them all, but they put a very nice Neopets spin on it, and they incorporated all of the lore of Neopets into it in a very good way. They didn't just shoehorn it in, be like, yeah, sure, the Super Fairy can figure it out, just slap her on a card. They did a really good job of incorporating this into it. So I think that the original deck they did a great job on the art, and then they ported it over to this one. Making a more budget-friendly version, I feel like, is a very smart move, because not everybody can afford to drop 60 some odd dollars on a tarot deck. But I feel like dropping about $20 is a lot more reasonable, especially if you are a tarot deck collector. Once you get to a certain point, it kind of feels like, I don't want to keep collecting tarot decks and never use them. So it's nicer to, I feel like, have a lower point kind of charge for it so that you don't feel as bad for buying another tarot deck, which if you're spending 60 some odd dollars on it, you will feel a little bad. But overall, this deck is not bad at all. I think they did a really good job. One of my biggest complaints is how big the cards are, because with my hands, I already fumble with shuffling, which we'll have the shuffling master shuffle this deck for us, my husband. I could not shuffle this. There is no way I would be able to shuffle this because it's so big and clunky. But we'll have him come in and shuffle this, and we'll see what he says about it. So here we have the Shuffle Master, as he's known. My husband shuffling them. He said when I asked him how it was to shuffle these, it's a pain in the ass. The biggest problem with them is they're so long that it's really hard to get a good grip on them and kind of like fan them together. He tried a couple of different ways to try to see what works best, and it looks like the bottoms together, like fanning them together, worked best. He also tried just kind of like cutting them into each other by like putting them back and forth. You'll see. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to shuffle, but he said that this deck is a little annoying to shuffle just because the cards are so big and so long. So they're a tiny bit unruly to shuffle. You can do it, but it's definitely not super easy. So one big thing with this tarot deck, which is kind of confusing to a lot of people, is this deck does not come with an in-game code for an item. The other deck, this one, does come with it. So just be aware if you're buying this one, it will not come with a virtual item code. So now that we've looked through this deck pretty quick and we've kind of seen all of the artwork, what the book looks like, all of that, let's look at the differences between these two decks because they are marketed as completely separate decks. This one's marketed as Neopets Tarot Deck, while this one's marketed as Neopets The Official Tarot Deck, Faerie Edition. So with this one, I feel like the branding is very confusing because this is an official Neopets item. You can see on the back that it is a Neopets Official Tarot Deck. It's missing the, but you know, same thing. This one is available through Geekify's website, which I'll have all of these linked down below. They're not affiliate links, but just to save you some time if you are curious. So this one is an official Neopets item. Now, one of the biggest differences between these two is this one comes with an in-game item code. So you will get an actual tarot deck on the site that you can play with your Neopets with this one. This one does not come with an item code at all. So that's one of the biggest differences between these right off the bat. And it can be a little confusing based on some of their marketing because people will see from this one, oh, the tarot deck comes with an in-game item, and then they'll get this one and it comes with no item code at all. So keep that in mind when you're buying these two. This one will come with an item code, this one will not. Now, the bigger price point difference that you can see between these is going to be very apparent. So first off, seeing the box itself, both boxes feel nice, but this box definitely has a softer coating on it. It also has magnets that hold it closed. So I feel like this box is a little bit nicer. This one is still not bad. It does have the little thumb holes so you can grab it and open it, and it holds the cards in it nicely. Everything fits together well, even if you take it all out and mess with it. This one's still not bad, but this box is definitely a lot nicer with the magnetic closure. And showing a little bit of difference between the boxes, this is the more expensive box. We can see that it's got that nice, soft paper and printing pretty much all throughout the box itself. It's got those magnetic closures. It's very nice, but the actual box for the newer one is just a little cardboard box. It still feels nice, and it's got printing all over, but on the inside, it's just a standard matte color and feels more like construction paper. So for the boxes, this box definitely feels nicer and a lot more attention to detail was put into this box, but given the price point, it makes sense. The next biggest thing is going to be the actual book itself. So I'm going to get the book out of both of these, and we're going to set these aside and look at these books. So you can already tell a huge difference between these two books. This one is hardback, while this one is paperback, which it's nicer to have a hardback one because it'll hold up a little bit longer, But other than that, I feel like for a book coming with a tarot card deck, if you've bought tarot decks that come with books, a lot of times the book is going to be a little ratty pamphlet and it's going to be worthless. So the fact that they even included this at all with the price point that it's at, I feel like is phenomenal. So it's still a great book. If we open the actual book itself though, we can see that this one has a nice opening page, and it's got a little bit nicer. This is still pretty nice, but I feel like the more expensive one's set up just a little nicer. So this one has a forward from Geekify. The forward has been removed in this because this deck is not made by Geekify. So it's got the exact same information on getting started here. It's got information on different card spreads. It's still got some pictures, but it does have different pictures. So we can see that this book, the one that's a little bit cheaper, actually shines a little bit better in this case because it's got a picture of the 3-card spread, where this one does not. It just has the numbers 1, 2, and 3 down at the bottom here. And then same thing with the 5-card spread, is it does have a little tiny area showing it, but this one actually shows the cards themselves kind of set up. So it's easier to kind of tell from that. The Celtic Cross is set up the same, but I prefer actually this one a little bit more because each card is labeled in these cases, where this one is just the cards itself. It still goes into the same amount of detail talking about all of these, but each one you can tell has a little bit of a difference in it. So this is going into the actual major arcanas. One change that is interesting is they spelled out 22 here and put it in numbers. Not big, but it's interesting to see that they've actually changed this text a tiny bit between the two books. This book is considerably smaller than this book. So things like the text, the font size, all of that has been changed in it itself, but the meat and bones of the book is still the same. So we can see that the name of the card is still here. We can see that the colored picture is still here. The printing is a little bit different on these. We can see that this one has rounded edges where this has squared edges. The colors look a tiny bit different, but I feel like that could be accredited to the actual page color itself. One thing that is a little bit better about this book is it has page numbers, where this one does not have any page numbers at all on the pages. But the information itself presented here is going to be the same. We've got our lore snippet, we've got our regular reading, we've got our reversed reading, and then we've also got just a little bit of Neopets fun information. So the information presented here is the same. For this one, it's broken down into 2 little paragraphs. This one, all of the information has been squished into 1 paragraph. Again, it's the same information presented. It's just presented a tiny, tiny bit different. So the book's meat and bones are essentially the same. We can see here the 2 pages for the minor arcana. Again, this one has a picture of the back, which is kind of nice. It has 14 spelled out, where this has 14 in a number. You can see very well from this, though, that the binding for the books themselves is completely different. This one has a sewn binding, which I don't know a lot about books, but I do feel like this would hold up a lot better over time since it's sewn in, where this is just going to be your typical glued binding. So over time, if you use this book a lot, it may not hold up quite as well as this one. Another big difference between the books is this one has a little bookmark in it, where this one, since it has a glued binding and not a sewn binding, doesn't really have anywhere to keep a bookmark. So that's going to be a big difference between these 2 books. One thing that I do find very interesting between the books is that the suits are in different orders in these books. Not quite sure why, but they are. So we can see, if we set this one aside for just a moment, for the cheaper one, the wands are first, the cups are second, the swords were third, and the pentacles are last. But the more expensive book, the swords are first, the pentacles are second, the cups are third, and the wands are last. Hey y'all, editing me. So I went back through and watched the first video, And the cards straight off the line are not in the same order as they're presented in the book. So I'm not sure why the suits are even in that order in the Geekify book. It's very confusing. This is not a big deal at all. It's just very interesting to see the difference that's taken place between these two books. I also find the ending pages very interesting between these because we can see on this one that it has pretty much all of the information that, I'm going to be honest, I don't know a lot about this stuff. I'm going to pretend like I do, but I don't. When I used to have to cite stuff in like middle school, all of the information is in the back of this book. But this book doesn't have any of that information. It just goes straight from the wands to a thicker page, and that's it. So it's very interesting that this book contains all of that information, even if it's in the back instead of the front where it normally is, where this contains absolutely none of it. So from here, you can pretty much tell that the books are pretty much the same. There are some minor differences. This one has fancy gold foiling on the front. It feels really nice. It's hardbound. It's sewn bound. It has a little bookmark in it. So this one's a little bit nicer, but this one still has the exact same information. It has its pros and cons between these two, but the same information is presented in both of these books in a very well way. So I think that they're pretty much both fine. This one's just going to hold up a little bit better than this one. One thing that I don't have is, in some cases with the other more expensive deck, is it actually came with a little card bag that was a blue velvet bag, and it had Neopets in gold on it. I didn't get that with mine for some reason. I think it was just a limited time offering that they had with it, but mine did not come with a bag. Obviously, this version did not come with a bag either, so that is a difference that could be different. Now, on to the cards themselves. There are a lot of difference quality-wise between these two cards. Art-wise, they have the exact same pictures on every single card. So if you got the Faerie deck, it's not that it has more fairies or anything in it. It has the same art on every single card with the original Geekify deck. There is absolutely no difference in the art other than the image on the back, and they made it a little bit clearer the number which each card is. So you can see on this one that it was printed directly on it. It is shiny, but it's a little hard to tell that's 8, where this one has been circled, a blue backdrop has been put on it, and it's a little bit easier to tell which one this is. Art aside, we can tell a little bit of difference between these two in the coloring of them. I'm not a color printing master or anything, so I am just going off of what I can actually see. We can see that the colors themselves, I feel like, look a little bit brighter on the one on the right. I'm sure my camera is not doing this very much justice. And then the one on the left, I feel like these are more standard colors that aren't quite as vibrant. You can see little details in the picture that have been changed due to placement. So this one, the tower itself at the top is cut out a little bit, but that's because they added this circle around the number itself at the top, where this one doesn't have that. So we can see a tiny bit more of the picture in this one compared to this one. Now, card quality is going to be different between these two. We can see that the one on the right has a much more matte finish. It is not anywhere near as shiny as the one on the left. So if you are going to do professional readings where you're taking a lot of pictures in a lot of variable lighting, I feel like the one on the right is a little bit better. It does have a little nice sparkle from the actual gold itself, so reflections could be odd with that, but the card itself, the art on it, isn't as difficult to see in some lighting as the one on the left. We can also see thickness-wise, I feel like they're fairly the same thickness, but the one on the right has gilded edges. So if we look at the decks as a whole, the one on the right has gilding on it, which means it's got this shiny gold around the outside. of all of the cards, where the one on the left has absolutely nothing on the outside, meaning that it's just the standard paper that it was cut from. This doesn't do anything fancy, in my opinion, to keep the integrity of the cards better or anything. It's just purely aesthetics, but I feel like it does give this deck a lot more of a luxe feeling compared to this one. Size-wise, we can see there's a big size difference here. If we actually put this card pretty much over the middle, we can see that there's a good amount that it's got on this, the more expensive card. I feel like this size, the more expensive one, is a little bit more manageable. I am awful at shuffling, but this is definitely more manageable than this. I feel like this is just a smidge too big for my hands to actually deal with, so shuffling this is gonna be a little bit difficult for me. Another big difference is going to be the art on the back. While it's very similar, because we can see the Neopets logo is the same, this one is not as bold as this one though. We can see that the little gold spindly thing here is the same. We can see that the copyright is moved. On this one, it's got copyright here, and then it has nothing down here. On this one, it's got the copyright in the bottom right, which I find interesting. If you're curious, because I'm sure you cannot see it on my camera, the copyright for the more expensive deck is 2002 from Neopets for my deck, and this one is 2024, which I find interesting. And then the actual image in the center is different. So for this one, it's got the fairy wings, which is very cute since it is the fairy deck, but I do like this one a lot better because if you do read reversals, you can't really tell between these two which one's up and which one's down. I like that a little bit more because if I've put out a 3-card spread kind of like this, and then I turn one over, I can tell that this one's this. But if I have this upside down, I can already tell that this is going to be a reverse card I'm reading. Where with these two, I can pull this one and pull this one and not be able to tell that this one was a reversal. That is completely going to be just your preference. A lot of people, like I said, don't even read reversals, but it is one thing to point out that it is very obvious when this one is upside down versus right side up in your deck. For the card quality, it's not bad. This is kind of a more construction card-y. If you've ever held a standard, I bought it at Walmart bicycle card deck, that's what this feels like. It feels very much like that. It'll hold up to the test of time, but with as big as it is going to be a little annoying to shuffle. This one is definitely thicker. This feels like not exactly 2 cards glued together, but it definitely feels like a card and a quarter kind of glued together. This one's a lot thicker than this one, meaning that it would hold up a little bit better over time to rigorous shuffling and reading and things like that. It also has a very nice feel to it on the front and the back of the card, very similar to the box, where this one just feels like your standard printed card. It just feels like paper. Another detail that may or may not bother you is the copyright date on the front of both of these cards. This card, I feel like it's a lot less intrusive because it's very small, where this deck, it's a lot bigger and a lot easier to see. Again, not a big detail, but it is something that you can tell between these 2 cards that is different. For the most part though, these cards are pretty much the same. Obviously, this deck is a lot nicer. It's got a lot more details and quality of life. That means it'll last a little bit longer, but this deck is the exact same images, just a little bit bigger. Another difference that I'm very sad to see between these 2 decks is the acknowledgements card. So this deck doesn't have an acknowledgements card. It's just the tarot deck, which makes sense because this card is an additional cost for an extra card in all of the decks. So it makes sense that they would cut this, but I really like having this little card that tells who all worked on it, between the art, the different suits, the book itself, all of that. I think they got rid of this, 1, due to the cost, and 2, the fact that it says Geekify on it. I can't find any Geekify information at all on this deck itself, so I'm assuming it's another one of those things where Neopets is broadening out, working with a different publisher, so they just pretty much scrubbed all of that from it, but it's still nice to have the credits. As we can see, this is the actual book from the cheaper deck, and then this is the acknowledgements card from the more expensive deck. So it seems like they do have this information, they just put it in the book itself, which personally makes way more sense, but it's just interesting that they didn't put it in the more expensive deck's book and put it in a card, which I still like having, and then this one they just put it in here because the image that's on the back of this card, I think is a unique image. So it's an image that you would not be able to see with this. Is this going to change anything? No, you can't even read with this unless you're trying to read these people's future for some reason. But it's still an interesting change between the two decks. So that is a look at the new Neopets tarot card deck, new in quotes. My opinions, I think it's great. I personally do. Again, I don't know anything about art or printing or any of that stuff. You can very, very, very much tell the quality difference between these two decks. But for the price point, for a tarot deck, this is nutty. It comes with an amazing book that has a lot of information in it. The cards are still just as adorable as they are in this one. My biggest con is going to be how big the cards themselves are, because it's very hard to shuffle in my tiny little grubby hands. I still can't shuffle these well. I don't know how I'm going to be able to shuffle this. I'm just going to try to slap them around and try my best. There definitely are some things like the box quality, the quality of the book, things like that that are very different, but for the meat and bones of it, I think they did a great job translating it over in this set. My biggest complaint besides the card size is the marketing between these two. I feel like this very much does need to be addressed because this is so confusing. These are the same deck. There's not really any difference between these decks other than the price point and the quality, which I feel like is negligible depending on who you are. So I now own two of the same deck. Okay. What am I going to do with this? So it's very confusing from a consumer standpoint what the difference here is and why I would want both of these. I completely understand rebranding this a little bit and needing to change up the information since it's no longer a Geekify exclusive product, but I definitely feel that more information needs to be put out there that this is the same as this, just a budget version. Thank you so much though for hanging out with me in the middle of all this. I'm very curious to see what your guys' take on this is. If you have any questions or anything like that, just leave them in the comments below for me. But thank you so much for hanging out and I hope you have a good day. See ya!